How will we prepare our staff for 2023? Hello, Camp Mavericks, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast, brought to you by UltraCamp, Camptivities, and GoCamp Pro. I'm Chris Hudson. I am the founder and camp director of Camp Highlight, a sleepaway camp for kids who have LGBTQ parents, and it is the best camp in the world.
It certainly is. And if my cats could go to that camp, I would send them. My name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors of Camp Woro. Camp Woro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities. And my pronouns are she, her.
And my name is Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility located in Fingal, Ontario. And we're part of the United Church of Canada's Camping Network. And we are the second best camp in the world, apparently.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? How you doing?
Good.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's just the three of us today, and we are going to chat about preparing our staff, figuring out how to safeguard our staff's physical and mental health as we go into the season. Before we do, though, this is a great opportunity to talk about our sponsor. Listen, you don't lead camp because you love the office. UltraCamp has everything you need to manage your program so you can spend more time doing what you love. Manage staff, register campers, take payments, and direct communication all in one place. You can find out more at ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker. So, everyone, the question on the table is, we've got a plan for another incredible year of camp. And coming off of the last couple of years, we've learned, or we've acknowledged, we've been reminded that our staff can sometimes have some, I don't want to say significant mental health needs, but it's something we need to be thinking about. So I'm curious, how are you two been thinking about going to this year, how to set our staff up for success?
I think that what happened for us, we didn't run summer camp in 2020 or 2021. And so for 2022, we had a returning staff member come back from like 2013, 2014 to be our camp director. And when part of my thing with preparing is listening to what happened, right? So because I'm not on the ground as some camp directors are every day, all day. And so to listen to what they think they need. And so one of the major things that we've done at Pierce Williams is we've restructured the staffing model a little bit. So the quick on that is that we probably about 7 years ago, we went to a camper choice-based sessions so that we're doing no cabin group sessions. You can choose the sessions you're going to, but we also made counselors the programmers. So counselors would create their own passion sessions, and then that's part of what the campers would choose. The counselor seemed really overwhelmed last summer with that model, partially because it was their first time and the programmer's first time using it. And so what we're doing, moving to this year, to take some of that stress off of the counselors and to allow them, as my team put when they sold this to me, to allow them to be the best counselor possible. They've taken and we'll hire 5 specific programmers that their whole job is to run those choice-based sessions while allowing counselors to be counselors. It's not that I'm hiring an extra 5 staff. Lots of times when people try to sell things to you as an executive director or a camp director, they think, oh, we're adding this much cost. And I'm like, no, like if you're in reality, these 3 of these people already exist. We're just reassessing where they go. And so what it means is that I might hire someone to be the STEM programmer. So all of their choice-based sessions have to be STEM-based. Or if somebody's the nature skills programmer, all of their sessions will be nature skills. The reality is campers are still going to choose, and counselors will still be at those programs, but counselors don't need to come up with those programs and worry about, the supplies and all of those things. And when these 5 staff aren't leading programs, they'll be around the camp to support counselors who have campers with bigger needs. the idea is also that you can give counselors mini breaks, right? So you can get them covered off for 15 minutes here and 15 minutes there, just to go to the bathroom, check in with themselves. And because our counselor stated that that's what they just need some time to regroup during the day. But they don't want to lose their hour-long break because you can't shower in 15 minutes. And I'm like, I can certainly shower.
I
in 15
can
minutes.
absolutely
Yeah.
shower in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I cannot. I will speak for those I can't.
Oh, okay then. There you go. We have
because you're like, where's my soap? Where's my things? You get stopped as you're going to the shower. It's
no. But once you're in the shower, the topic's now showering.
Listen, Chris, I'm looking at you. You have no beard. You have your head is quite short. Your hair is quite short.
Okay. No. I take it back. Not in a
situations.
judgmental way. Just curious. Just curious.
And I think sometimes what staff need is just a few minutes of alone time or
exactly.
So those are some of the things we're doing.
Gabz, what about you?
I think so. If we're looking back and we're looking at our gap years, what I'm seeing as a culture within my camp, that there's certain things that our staff haven't been able to pass on to one another. So for example, our seniors in 2021 campers, typically our seniors are very inclusive. They are very much if some kids that are younger are like, ugh, this is lame, they're like, no, it's amazing. And they really bring the energy of our camp up. And in 2021, our seniors acted the way they thought seniors should act because they had missed a year. And so they were more like too cool for school. And that was sort of like a tough thing. So I see that a little bit in our staff as well. Not too cool for school, but not necessarily knowing how to manage dissatisfaction, coming forward. I'd heard, a couple of my staff members saying, leadership team members are too intimidating to talk to. That's why I don't come forward. And we talked a lot about the feeling of being intimidated versus intimidation. And when I went through all of my leadership team members, did any of these people exhibit intimidating behaviors? And I was like, no. So it's just difficult to come forward to a supervisor. Those are muscles that we have to develop. So understanding that they're developing these muscles as we go. Chris, you were talking about, a little bit before about how you're relooking at your staff hiring. So typically every single staff member, whether they've been with us for 1 year or 5 years, go through an interviewing process. This year, we're going through a 2-part interviewing process where we're really focusing on the first part is on community and responsibility and hindsight. So in hindsight, last year, when it comes to contributing to positive community, what would have I done differently? So we're also looking for building their sense of awareness and also accountability. So this is it's small muscles that we want them to practice, but it's something that we put energy into in our interviews. And then the second interview is professional goal setting for themselves, which is really stated as they can adjust this during the summer, but we want them to start planning what they want those goals to be. And those are developed into 4 categories: community, leadership, task management, and communication. And in these categories, we have different pillars, such as in community, there's community with campers, building community with campers, building community with peers, building community with supervisors. So some people were asking them to look at specific areas that we want them to build their goals based off of these pillars, because a lot of the times I think where we're getting a disconnect, and this is from a conversation I had with, I surveyed my staff and surveyed some of the people that were observing our camp this summer, some past leadership team members. What we saw was a big, strong mistrust with authority and our staff, even though it wasn't warranted. And that's, I'm sure, has to do with COVID, has to do with how our governments are dealing with things. It's all projection, I'm guessing. So, but we want to shift that dialogue we want to be a little bit less they and them in the sense of our staff versus leadership team or authority. So we want to show them that your supervisors, you have a responsibility with community as well, speaking up, taking accountability, et cetera, et cetera. So really looking at our hiring process is number 1. And then number 2 is making sure that we're not overextending our camp in the sense of if we have two, we want to make sure we're not completely full camper wise until we have the right amount of staff, and then we'll open up the rest of our registrations. And that's just so that we can make sure we have the right team that we need. And nobody is guaranteed a position at Waro, and nobody's guaranteed a promotion either. And that's an important part that our staff is relearning again, because they didn't have that necessarily older generation to show like, oh yeah, I didn't get that job because, etc. So this is sort of where we're starting.
Just for the people listening,
I just want to say I was scribbling furiously, Gabz.
Yeah, can you restate your 4 pillars?
Yeah. So the 4 pillars. So the 4 pillars are community, and then within community, you have campers, peers, and supervisors. So how do you build community with that group? And then the next one is communication. And sorry, I'm actually opening it as we speak. Communication. And so that's again with your campers and your supervisors. Here, let me just, okay. So community building is campers, peers, and self-care. Communication is campers, peers, supervisors. Intervention and language. Language for us is because we are a multilingual camp. You have to practice communicating in both languages. Leadership is within the section, like the different units on camp, staff and camp life, and then task management. This is all different for different camps, but like, you know, how good are you at with your schedule within emergency situations, your staff duties for those that work in the kitchen, and then paperwork, which is a big one for us. So these are, you can make any pillars that you want, but then underneath those pillars, what are some of those like little areas that we want them to focus on? And I can share a version of this document with everybody. But this is based off of our camp curriculum, which we have developed in 2017. It's just that now we're bringing it much more into our staff hiring, and we're bringing it much more into goal setting. And one of our staff members who's full-time with us, Alexandre Bien, who's brilliant, she's also a figure skating judge. And it's very helpful to have her with this curriculum and her perspective, because she says it is subjective, but staff need to get used to the subjective. And as a figure skating judge, it is subjective, but you do have very clear guidelines on what you're judging on. We don't use judging, we say guiding, of course. But with that sort of guidance, and I've worked with some of my staff members who are teachers that help develop the curriculum. But I think the point is that we can use our staff members' hindsight, the returning ones, on what would they have done differently, and use that as a tool of reflection. And one of my staff members that really struggled last summer, because they were very caring towards a camper that was struggling, they over-focused on that camper and ignored other campers. And as much as we tried to create guidelines for that staff member, they still over-focused on that camper. And when I spoke with them this year, they took responsibility, for that. And then it helped me also realize I didn't check in with them the way they needed to be checked in with. So it created a really nice, oh, I know what you look like when you're overwhelmed, and I know how to now check in with you, and now you know how to also ask for help. So this hindsight piece I think is really important. And then looking forward, goal setting, but within the parameters of the camp, I think is also really helpful.
That was a masterclass, and I think you were going to help a lot of people this summer. Honestly, I mean, you've helped me already. You know, thinking about mental health of the staff is something that we have really been focused on. As you mentioned, Gabz, like we were talking before the cast, and I was like, we are really overhauling our hiring, and we're looking at every staff member again. Everyone is reapplying for their positions and re-interviewing. And it's just because it's a good opportunity to level set. Our camp's been in operation now for 12 years. It's like just a good time to like just check in with everyone, the people who've been there for 5, 6, and 7 years. The mental health piece, I think looking forward, oh boy, okay, I'm gonna wade into it. You know, Joe, you had made a comment a couple episodes back where you were like, you know, you'd made the comment, or you had wanted to make the comment to a staff member, like, hey, listen, when I was your age, I could handle all this and more. And I had said to you, I was like, listen, this age, like this generation, we were never this age. You know what I mean? We were never this age at this time. They're dealing with different stuff. And looking forward, one, Gabz, everything that you said, like I said, I furiously wrote down, because I think preparing for mental health is really looking at the job and looking at the candidates and what you're doing, being really mindful about who comes in the door, by really assessing the qualities you're looking for. I think that's the first step. At first, it may not seem connected, but it's very connected, because it's a stressful job. It's a stressful job. I mean, if it's a sleepaway camp, it is 24 hours. If it's a day camp, it's nonstop, from moment they arrive to moment they leave, right?
Yeah.
I am thinking about and I know, I'd love to hear from people what they're doing, because I've talked to camp directors who are they're hiring a social worker, a psychologist part-time to come on to campus for 2-3 hours a week, so staff knows they're available. That feels like it's one end of the curve for me. That feels like a lot. I as a mental health practitioner myself, I'm a social worker, and I feel a kind of way about offering treatment to our staff during their job. I don't know, that feels a certain way to me. However, I do like the idea of letting staff know, hey, there's someone you can talk to, there's someone you can express yourself to. And I would say that's even better if that person's not a direct supervisor, because then that just gets loaded, right? So that's something that we're thinking about, is having someone that people can turn to. I'm thinking, in my own mind, our arts and crafts person also happens to be a social worker, and I was thinking and everyone loves her. So it's hey, you know what? Maybe she can devote an hour or 2 hours, an hour a day. People just drop in and just talk about how they feel, because I know that she would handle that well. And that's not entirely treatment. The other part of the topic that we haven't touched on is the physical health of our staff. How are we safeguarding that? I am really big about making sure that staff has enough rest. At the same time, I'm really big on staff working 100% of the time, giving their 100% of the time that they are awake. So how do those things go together? Joe, you're bringing in people to relieve staff, which I think is fantastic. And I want to talk to you more about that, because I'm having trouble just finding staff. You're finding staff on staff. That's how.
Well, so Pierce Williams is not fully staffed, just so we're all on the same page.
Okay.
We briefly, Jory and I had a very brief meeting before this podcast to go over where our staffing was at, because we have some group interview days coming up. So unlike the two of you, I'm not reworking the entire interview process. What we're being is very selective on who we're going to allow back from last summer. And I've talked on this podcast numerous times over the past 10 years about the idea that don't bring back people who suck, because if you want to be the best summer camp, or as we are, the second best summer camp, then you need to really focus on hiring amazing staff. I think that the idea that you find who you find, but I like Gab's idea as well, that you're not just letting anybody sign up for camp until you know you have the staff and the staff in place. And that was something I had done last summer already. And so we're still in very early stages of our camper registration, because we're a very small nonprofit camp. But I think that for lots of it goes to this idea of when Gabz was, I didn't furiously write down, I furiously typed, hey, I need you to share this document with me. But a couple of the things I had written down, and one that works really well with Gabz stuff, is the idea of framework, right? It's a concept that I've used for years. The idea that if we do not give our staff the framework, then they can go off on some wandering path. And they might come back to us after 3 months of doing something by themselves before the summer and be like, oh, here's what I've planned. And you're like, that's not at all what we, right? You've wasted a ton of energy and time doing this thing. And I think that we talked this morning about redoing all of our job descriptions with a framework paragraph, right? So if you're a programmer, here's your framework. You're going to create the most amazing summer camp programs. You're going to create 5 to 10 programs for your specialty. And in your downtime, here's where you're going to do it. Here's where we're going to take breaks. So we're giving them a framework so their creative energy can be poured into that they know what they're doing. And then I wrote down, maybe it's as simple as make sure they know, make sure our staff know what they're getting into, right? Our staff walking into camp without the knowledge of what camp is. And if that means that I have a new staff member who I connect with an old staff member, right, a new applicant, and I just send, I'm like, great. Hey, listen, after the group interview day, we're going to have Shuffle reach out to you and just chat about camp so that you understand what camp is from the perspective of another young person, and someone who's grown up at camp, and really help them understand. I think that gets to the point of making sure they know what they're getting into, making sure they know. And then I did have the other thought that I might add another staff member, Chris, so like try to find someone else or rephrase. So specifically this summer and the next, specifically this and the next 4 or 5 summers, the idea of having a community builder on staff whose task is just to help build community, because listening to Gab talk about like people's aversion to authority, I know I'm intimidating. I get it. When you're 6'3" and way over 300 pounds, the beard certainly does not help. But I do, and I've said numerous times, and I said it in my first ED eval of 12 years the other night to my board members who were doing my ED eval. I go to zero effort to sort of dispel any intimidations people feel. Like it just doesn't, because I don't spend the energy there. But when you said it, Gab, I was like, oh, they were intimidated by people 1 year older than them in a leadership position. Yeah.
6 months
I'm like,
older.
yeah, I'm like, what, or younger than them, right? Like who are just because they're in a leadership position. And I was like, this, it's an interesting idea. Last summer, very late in the game, I'd had the idea of bringing a family to camp each week and just having the parents and the kids in camp, but having alumni families or alumni being able to stay in a specific spot in camp and just have them be guiders of camp and talk to staff and help staff.
You are just bringing in you're bussing in so many people. It's just so many.
But I think,
oh man.
But I think a lot of that is community as well. So I think the pandemic opened up for us at Pierce this idea that there are people who want to see camp succeed, right? And the pandemic put a lot of camps, including ours, in very precarious positions to moving forward. And so to find these people, be they donors or be they alumni who want to help, or a free week at an all-inclusive summer camp that doesn't have alcohol, right, is fine, right? And there's a bit of guidance and direction, but I think it all comes back to that word framework for me. What's the framework that they would work within as a community builder or as an alumni coming back for a week? What's the framework we're getting for our counselors? Because you know that you can sit at your desk. I'm looking at my desk right now. And there is a ton, like our frameworks are huge. Like we have a whole bunch of crap that we need to wade through. But if you're a summer camp counselor, the smaller, the more concise we can make your framework, the easier it is so that your energy doesn't get wasted on thinking about, I need to know everything that goes on at camp. No, you don't. Here's your framework. And we go with that.
It's interesting to me as I reflect on the conversation that we've been having for the past few minutes. Like we started talking about mental health and then pretty quickly started talking about community building, management and hiring. And I don't think that's an accident. And I don't think we're off topic, listeners. I don't think we're off topic. I think this is part and parcel in safeguarding the mental health and the physical health of our staff. How are we setting them up for success, both mentally and physically? I'd mentioned rest before, like, again, Joe, your solution is to bring in bus in a whole bunch of people for relief, and like, although I'm going to be honest, part of that feels wild to me, but if it works, that's fantastic. And I think it communicates to the staff too, that, oh, they are doing this for us because our physical and mental well-being is important. I have to say, like, 30 years ago when I was a counselor at camp, they asked us to do a lot of stuff, and I just kind of did it because that was the thing of the day. But looking back, did my camp director really care about our physical and emotional well-being? I can't. They were nice people, but I can't say they did. And I based that only on how the day was structured, only on how the kind of ratios that we enjoyed, or rather did not enjoy at the time. And I think communicating to the staff that this is important, I think that's really critical in building the community. So letting staff know, like, hey, we're building a community for you. Hey, we are really gatekeeping to make sure that the people who come in here can handle it. And we want to make sure that you are what we're looking for. Going back, and now I'm having trouble distinguishing our conversation before the podcast and what was actually recorded. However, when I think about our staff's mental health and what their needs are, I think about also their ability to communicate that. And so I guess what I'm saying in a really roundabout way is that when we create an environment that we let the staff know we care about it, they give us feedback about what they need, which for us last year was the disconnect. Staff was not communicating with us about what their needs were because either they thought we weren't going to listen, or we weren't going to provide, or it wasn't quite appropriate.
Or would cause conflict.
Or could cause conflict, or would trigger or exacerbate them in some
or
other
they
way.
thought somebody else already talked about it because they were all talking about it, and somebody said, I'm going to say something, and nobody actually came forward. There's so many reasons.
Or they wrote a letter because they thought a letter would be more efficient than
and
having it reviewed by 5 people and then like a week and a half later.
List. Yeah.
Let me ask a possibly controversial question. This is something that at our camp we ask about the campers all the time, but it's something we're asking about the staff. Gabz, you laid out your plan for hiring, and hiring is gatekeeping, right? We want to get people in the room who can do the job, right? And again, this might be controversial, but when we talk about staff and supporting them and community, right? Is there a bridge too far? What kind of staff can't we support? What kind of issues might come up? This has come up at our camp before, is that, every year, I don't know, does this happen to you too? Every year we get an applicant who writes on their application, I have sensory issues. I don't like crowds or large noises or surprises. To which I say, this is a summer camp. I'm not certain we can keep you away from those things. Well, anyway, my point is, are there qualities, are there issues, are there challenges that maybe you've decided hey, we can't support this here? And it's always a hard call to make. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Gabz, what do you think?
Well, I think I'll start with saying that for me, hiring and I understand what you're saying by gatekeeping. The way I like to approach staff hiring is that we're trying to provide the most information possible so that together we can figure out if this is the right position or job for them, and sort of have that sort of almost team-like mentality. And the idea is that we want to provide agency for our staff members, because when they have agency, then there's a sense of accountability and responsibility behind those decisions that they've made. I have sensory issues myself. And so I think that it's only something I realized when I was much older, but I think that it's interesting. I'm fascinated by this. So why are you interested in a summer camp? We have all of those things. Do you have tips and tricks? What's drawing you to this organization? We have campers that have sensory issues too. I think that the idea is getting to the core of why they want to do what they're doing, and genuinely getting curious about it. I've had certain staff members that on paper don't seem like they'd be the best for our organization. But then with that sort of together mentality, we typically figure it out. I also don't do all the interviews on my own. I have other people that do those interviews, and we say very transparently to the applicants, we're not here to convince you about the Waro experience. We're actually here to deter you. We're going to tell you all the not so great things about camp and why it's tough. And then if you're still interested or cuckoo bananas enough to want to continue, then that's great. Let's continue that conversation. I think what happens is when they actually are at camp and then there's needs that start to pile up. I think that's difficult. And I think having a framework to support those needs. And when we're looking at physical wellness and mental wellness, before staff come to camp, how do we create a space to set very clear expectations? How do we build the muscles of responsibility and accountability? And within our framework that we have, what are things that we can change from what we've done in 2019? And I think adding extra time where we can find time is important. I think having people to talk to, I'm with you, Chris, having maybe a social worker on site, for me, it doesn't necessarily fit with us, but we do have trans and non-binary staff members at Waro, and I'm not non-binary and I'm not trans, and none of my leadership team members are. And so I have somebody that they can talk to. I also have somebody that they can talk to for people of color or that have intersectionalities at Waro that our leadership team members might not be available to answer or hold space. I want to hold space for them, but I'm not the person to hold that space for them. So what are some of the things that we can do to adjust within the framework that Joe was talking about so that we're accommodating that rest need and the space need? And I think also, as camp directors that have been around for a little while, we can expect a thank you for the stuff that we're doing for them that we never got as staff members ourselves, or that we never did in 2018 or 2019. And then lastly, I would say with any of these adjustments, I always try to bring in a core small sample team of staff members and leadership team on any of these adjustments that we're making so I can get feedback. A lot of the time, the feedback is pretty positive. It's like, oh, I love this idea. This person that's, going to be holding space for us, this is great. And they give me a little feedback. But more importantly, the positive aspect is that they share that with their friends, and it becomes less intimidating, less overwhelming, less new. But it is a process. But we do have to shift, that's why we're talking about these things. And I don't think we can pendulum swing, but I do think more time off, holding space, accountability, it's all part of the whole person, the whole team.
Joe, I'm curious what you think about this. You're going to get the last word on this.
I think the idea of when people apply to camp, and we made a really concerted effort last year to change our camp registration for campers. Instead of saying register, we called it an application so that we can review each of them. And because camp isn't for every kid. Our camp isn't for every kid, and our camp isn't for every staff member. And sometimes our expectations are too great to meet your needs, or the special attention you may need isn't something that we can provide on the limited budget that we have. And when somebody applies with a variety of needs, we have different programs that we can, so we have an adult volunteer unsupervised integration program. So if there's people with actual needs that would limit them from being staff. The other thing is also knowing when to call it, right? Like there are staff members who come to camp, think they can do it, and then something happens and they can't. Their mental health isn't at that point, and we're very lucky to be close to where our staff live. So last summer, one of our staff came and said to our camp director that they're just not, my medication was changed, and so I don't feel like I can be a counselor this week. And we were like, oh, well, and so we shifted some people around because we have staff that we can shift, which then would mean that person would be a program assistant. But we knew that person wasn't successful as a program assistant early in the summer because they need the framework of having a group of kids they're responsible for. And so I literally approached them and said, listen, we're going to send you home. Like, we're not going to have you here this week. And because we don't want you to have an unsuccessful summer or an unsuccessful week, because we do week-to-week contracts. We don't want you to have an unsuccessful week, which would then further potentially limit your abilities to return to camp.
Hard conversation to have, though.
It is, but
it's funny because from their perspective, do you know what I mean?
They literally said, I thought that you would do this. and I think this is best for me. And I was like, great. Like, you know, this is also someone we had to teach to stop talking in third person.
Oh dear. I mean, it's great when they agree. It's when they disagree.
That's a life lesson right there.
Yeah, it's when they disagree
Thanks
is
to
the
camp.
issue. Yeah, because it's like when we see that a staff member is decompensating fast, right? Something about the environment.
Yeah.
We had a staff member who, who had sensory issues, and we talked about their needs, and they came to camp, and we were doing fine, but then they became overwhelmed, and they could no longer communicate verbally. They couldn't supervise the kids, and it became a safety issue.
Well, and it begs the question. We did have another staff member who had sensory issues that caused caused a 911 call in last summer, and it causes a question to be like, we know you love camp, but what role do you play at camp if you're taking the energy away from everyone else at camp, right?
And
if people have this anxiety about when's the next time it's going to happen to this person, then they're not spending their energy on the framework that I've given them, right?
And the issue is like I was saying, like, this staff member did not agree with us that this was too much for them, and that was a difficult conversation. Right. Yeah. And because like this complete shutdown happened in the middle of a lightning and thunderstorm, the kids had to be moved from one place to another, and this person just couldn't do it. And like I always say, we've made promises to families and parents that we keep their kids safe. So if we can't do that baseline, still difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
All right. All right, you two, let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor. Scheduling is the backbone of every camper's experience, but when there's a staffing change, it's almost impossible to fill that role with someone who knows all of the nuisances a schedule takes. So come check Camptivities out. It's specifically designed for camps by, guess what? Camp people. You can find out more at camptivities.com. And now it's time for our tool of the week.
My tool of the week is something I'm using right now, which is called CenterCam. So it is a webcam that literally puts the camera in the center of your computer screen. So there is a very small cable, maybe 1/4 inch, hanging down, and it's flexible metal. And then the camera is in the middle of the screen. And right now for this recording, if you're watching on YouTube, if not, I literally have the Zoom window underneath the camera. So like I'm looking at Gabz and Chris. So it looks like I'm making eye contact with you versus like looking up. And Chris and Gabz I've been using it the entire podcast, so they could talk to what it looks like from their end. But from my end, some people would be like, it's taking up screen real estate. But this is one of the things early in the pandemic that I was like, why is the camera not in the middle of your screen? Like, why not? So this is CenterCam. TikTok made me buy it. And
TikTok made you buy it. The peak capitalism, everybody. Peak.
Well, but this is one of those things where it took me a year of following them on TikTok to finally be like, you know what? Now's the time. And it's the same. It's a basic webcam with a clip. I have a carrying case for it, and it comes with it comes with a ring light that you can also.
Cool.
That's
and so
cool.
They have these clips so that the metal flexible part clips in, and then you can move it around and it'll.
And I will say, from a perspective of someone who's been talking to you for half an hour plus, I will say it is a much more natural. It's like more of like a newscaster feel. Like it does feel like we're here together.
Yeah. So second tool of the week, just because you know me.
You're sneaking in a second tool. Okay.
So I have on Windows, they have an app called Power Tools, Power Toys, sorry. And so there's a part of Power Toys is that you can have a screen always on top. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is Zoom is literally on top of every screen. So I can have my web browser with Gmail behind it, as I do right now. but I can still see you and Gabz because it's always on top. And so Power
That's
Toys
cool.
help set
All right.
that up. So
2
yeah.
tools. Gabz, you're only required for 1 though. You don't have to overachieve like some of our friends.
Thank you, thank you. Well, mine is called a Coursera, so like Coursera, but with course in it, and it's an app that you can have, on your computer, iPad, whatever device you like to use, and you can audit university classes from around the world. They're free unless you want to pay, I think it's like $67. And if you do pay, then you will get a certification at the end of the course. They're quite manageable, and with a lot of, I'm finding that I want to get back to learning when it comes to dealing with our staff and our campers. So here's some of the classes I'm taking right now: Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Essentials, Uncommon Sense Teaching, Building Community and Learning Habits, Leading Teams, Developing as a Leader, and then my favorite now is Managing Emotions in Times of Uncertainty and Stress. Feelings Matter.
You go.
So
Awesome.
these are you can listen to them. They're easily done. They're kind of geeky in some ways because they're university professors. They also have quizzes that you can do to help check your your knowledge retention. I think it's just nice as a baseline of understanding what professionals are doing out there, and most of them is rooted in research, which I love. So it's helping me with my anxiety, to be honest. It's nice learning these things, and you can do it at your own pace. Unless it's a paid course, then you need to submit your assignments on time. So yeah, Coursera, free, and check out what kind of information you might want to get. And it's just a couple of hours a week.
Awesome. Thank you. I have two mild tools that will add up to like one powerful singular tool. The first one is
Overachiever.
well, I don't feel like either of them on their own can hold enough weight, but let me get to it. First off, I just want to say, okay, what am I holding?
Oh, hello, bamboo.
This is a bamboo plant.
Yeah.
What people need to know about me is that I do not have a green thumb whatsoever. Usually anything that comes into this apartment that isn't human dies. Like it's not, plants have never been my thing. But my cousin had given me these bamboo plants and I had taken on the challenge, like I'm going to keep them alive. This is what I've learned from this. One, if you are not a plant person, buy some plants, because the one thing I am learning is patience. And I'll tell you, as a camp director who's been doing this for a long time, and I am self-aware, my patience is just dwindling as the years go on. And yes, I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced that, but the plants really help me. Like, it's just, you can't overwater them, you can't underwater them. Everything has to be just right with the sunlight, and it's just really a slow going task. For someone who's type A and just sort of like just a touch ADHD, it's been very calming for me. So I give that to you. The other like low-key recommendation I have is shutterfly.com. I bring this up because we are right now in the midst of doing our yearbook. Every year we take all the pictures and we put a yearbook together for our kids. Shutterfly.com we've been using for like 9-10 years. They make it really easy, really simple. They ship it really fast. We sell it to families. We sell the yearbooks to families, and everyone loves them. I would just encourage more camps to do like a yearbook. I know camps have different versions of that. And I know everyone wants to do everything online all the time. But when I tell you, there's nothing like when I do visit campers at their home and they drag me into their room to show all the yearbooks on their bookcase. It's just something you can't replicate. They freaking love it. They love to look at the old yearbooks and like laugh about how young they used to look. It's like, it's such an event. Anyway, those are my 2 recommendations. And that's it. I want to say thank you to Joe and Gabz, and thanks for the evening, friends.